Welcome to Parenthood Bytes, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of three incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to episode 5 of Parenthood Bytes. We're here today with Song, who is the VP of Technical Services at Nium and lives in the Bay Area. Welcome, Song. We're so happy to have you here today.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm looking forward to hearing your story. So, I like to start by just asking what brought you to tech and how many years have you been in tech?
I've been in tech for almost 25 years now. Um, what brought me to tech? Well, I majored in computer science in college, so it's a natural progression in tech. So I've been in the Bay Area most of my life since high school. So
Nice, 25 years. So you must have seen like a lot of things change and evolve during your time in tech.
yeah, it's pretty much everything happens in waves. Technology, companies, things like that. So.
Yeah, for sure. So, how many years have you been in tech before you became a parent?
I worked for about 10 years before I became a parent. So a little bit under 10 years, probably more like, 7 or 8. But, you know, I would say roughly around 7 or 8 years or 10 years in that ballpark. So,
Nice. So, would you say you were like pretty mid in your career when you had a kid?
yeah, I would say I was a little bit of a late bloomer. So I was kind of early mid in my career when I was in tech. And then, obviously, when I got married, we had our son really quick, like after a year after I got married. So it's pretty early. So
Yeah, I hear you. I think we were married for 6 months and then I got pregnant. And I think back and I'm like, oh, maybe we should have
gave us some time. Yeah,
had that
yeah.
married life a little longer before having kids. So, how old is your son?
Oh, he's now 17. So it's been a while. He's older now. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, what was it like when when you were sharing with work that you were having a baby? Like, how did they respond?
Oh, I mean, most companies are pretty responsive when you have a child. Like because I think uh, people are, oh, they're congratulatory, things like that. And then everybody wants to give you advice after that. So it was actually pretty straightforward. And I think the hard part is you had to get up to speed with all the like benefit laws, company laws, and then obviously it's actually I think a bit more challenging uh, for my wife than it was for me because she had to understand like how much time she needed to take off. Does her company allow her to take off? Do they pay fully? Do you need to get benefits? Do you need to get disability? Do you need like all the benefit stuff you had to work through? So that was tricky for me. It was really more like how long that I can get off, and it's funny because uh, when we had our son, paternity leave was more lean towards the mother than the father. Father only gets 2 weeks, which I thought was really strange. so.
Yeah. How long was your wife's leave?
So my wife actually had a high risk pregnancy, so she had to take leave earlier. Then her company told her they couldn't pay her for the time she's taking off. They needed to She needed to go on some form of disability benefit and get be to supplement her payroll. So she was out for almost 6 months. So
So, what is she in a different industry than you?
yeah, she's actually my wife's a CPA, but she works for a nonprofit organization as a CPA, and then but she's also worked she worked with tech, but she knows a lot about the tech industry through me. Incidentally, she probably the one thing she probably doesn't want to work in tech because it's a little rigorous. And then yeah, and most families know this in Silicon Valley that you have to kind of pick and choose and work together and how you're going to manage a family because you can't have two people working in tech. That'd probably be a little gnarly. Uh, so
Yeah. And so, did you take the full 2 weeks off?
I did. I took the first interesting story when I took the 2 weeks off, and you don't prepare yourself for how exhausting having a child is. And then my first day back at work, right before I got into work, I got into a fender bender. So I got into a little. I was so tired driving into the office that I got into a little accident, and then I had to go deal with that after, even when I got back to work. So.
Yeah, it's very exhausting. The baby days, right?
Oh yeah, you're not even focused. You don't even like. You're not even. It's hard to focus at work. You're not even thinking about like. You're just trying to get through the day versus like trying to perform well at work. I guess you would call it. So.
For sure. How was it transitioning back to work after your 2 weeks?
It was tough because I was at a startup. That if you work in tech, sometimes you end up at a startup and not big tech. So big tech actually gives you a little bit more leniency to kind of transition in. But at startups, they want to give you their time, but they kind of bother you while you're on paternity leave, for me. And then when you get back, you kind of have to hit the ground running because, startups are trying to grow the business. They're trying to, keep the company going and things, you have milestones to hit, things like that. So it was an interesting time.
But especially you're exhausted with the baby, and then you got to go to work and be completely on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and back then, I mean, you think back then, I mean, you might remember the show. There wasn't a lot of remote work environments back then, so it wasn't like you can just say, "I'm going to work from home." So, is that okay? Back then, it was like, no, everybody comes to the office. Everyone's in the office all the time. It wasn't like, I mean, some companies had remote work from home Friday, but it wasn't like now where you have like a hybrid work schedule. Parents work from home. So it was kind of weird because you see the parents in the office, the people who had children or have little kids, because sometimes they're like zombies.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I remember those days. Like you
yeah,
said, you're just trying to get through the day.
yeah, you're just like, I got to get through the day. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you go home and you're like, oh boy, this is my second job.
yeah, yeah. When you go home, you're like, it's not like you get a break. You go home and then you gotta, then for me, I used to joke around when I get home. My wife would be like, "Here, your turn." So,
Yeah, there's that balancing act.
yeah,
Um,
totally.
so do you remember if there was a mother's room at your work?
Yeah, no, I didn't actually see a mother's room until I got to probably 5 years after I had my son, 5 or 4 years. No, no, 4 years after I had my son, I joined a startup in San Jose, and it was growing really fast. So we had a lot of. I just remember us having a lot of like young married people in the like people who were married that were younger. They end up having kids, and I think one of the ladies kind of demanded it, and then they just converted a small remote office and put some tinted windows up, and they called it the mother room. And so that was the first time I heard the concept of it you
Yeah,
know
and it seems like with startups too, like when there's a need, then they start.
Yeah, they don't actually have. Yeah, so yeah, interesting enough, my wife, when she went back to work, her office didn't have it because they were a little bit old school in financial services, and so she ended up having going to the women's restroom to do the, I don't know if I could say, it, but like the
Yeah,
breast pumping, the things that you do throughout the day.
yeah,
And then having to carry that stuff to the fridge and store it and do all this stuff. And, I just remember her saying it was pretty much, it was real hassle. So,
yeah. It's pretty uncomfortable. I mean, when I was at a startup, we were at an offsite and there was no room, so they're like, just go to the bathroom. But it was like a one-room bathroom, so I came out. Everybody was in line to use the bathroom, and I'll never forget this. She was like, what were you doing in there? Making brownies? And I was like, oh my God, you see my pump bag. Like, I was so embarrassed. But then you're put into those weird situations where
Yeah,
people just
yeah,
don't understand.
yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, yeah. Back in those days, it wasn't very parent sensitive or accommodating for young parents. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you do for childcare when your son was?
So that was really tricky for us because we lived in Santa Clara and we both worked in Burlingame, which was quite of a commute for us. I mean, it was okay when we didn't have children because we would commute together. So we couldn't get. We tried to get local childcare, like in the city area, but we soon realized that's not a good idea because none of us are down there. And if we had to go, when you have kids, they get sick, they throw up, something happens, it would take us like 40 minutes just to get down there, right? Or because of traffic. So we had a friend. Well, actually, my wife's coworker referred her to someone in the area because she lived up in the area, and then we had sort of we found a daycare in the area there. But it was really that in itself has its own challenges because let's say let's say I'm sick, but my wife is off, or she's off, or I'm sick, but we still need to take kid. We want to take the kid to childcare. We had to drive. Like it was like a weird. I don't know how to put it. It's like it has its own like good, and like it's good when we're both at work and we can drop our child off and then pick them up, but it's bad when you have to like, oh, we're both I actually have to she's not feeling well, but she can't, or I might be out of town on a business trip, she's not feeling well, but she can't take our son to daycare because it's way in Burlingame, and we can't do the flight vice versa because that doesn't work either because when we're at work most of the days, like 5 days a week, you can't do that. So it was really tricky. Ultimately we just decided to move closer up north, which kind of solved a lot of those problems. But it was tricky in the first like year, first year or not, first year of childcare because we were kind of doing this kind of shuffle thing. So it was kind of tricky back then. So
Yeah, especially when your kid is little.
yeah, and on top of that, it's if you live in the Bay Area and tech, you realize really quickly childcare is like having a luxury car payment or more.
So expensive. And then if you're late to pick up your kid.
So it's so expensive. Yeah, it could be probably the most. I think because my wife's a CPA. I think at one point we said that it was probably the biggest expense we had in our budget at the time because you rent. We didn't actually own a home at the time, so it was like you had expenses. Then you look at the daycare expenses and just like in my mind it's like, man, this is like a nice car, like a really nice car. So
Yeah. Eventually I was just like, I don't want to look at it. Let's just write the check and like don't think about it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then they
Yeah.
charge like I think like $15 a minute if you pick them up late or something.
Yeah, yeah, they had all these like weird fees that things like yeah, I just remembered little things like late fee. Then they had like a Then they had like you had to pay for their vacation time where they didn't. And I was just like, why do we have to pay when we're not? They're like, well, it's like a school, and you need to like we need to take a break, but we also. I was just like, and then they all do it, so it's not like you can't. I mean, I know some places you can probably negotiate that, but in this
Yeah.
case, they all do it.
I
So.
hear you. It's a whole thing. Those days were tough.
Yeah, they were tough. Yeah, I was glad when elementary school came around years later.
Yeah. So how has your work life changed since you became a parent?
I think the biggest change is, I mean, if you work in tech, you know that it's just kind of sometimes nonstop. So I sort of accept the fact that um, you just kind of have to tell yourself you're going to be working a lot or working not typical hours. And you just have to, me personally, I have to kind of balance my schedule with my wife's schedule and make sure that I'm around. I don't want to be one of those parents that are not around. So it's like I have to still make it to flag football games. I have to still figure out how to do activities, things like that. So it's tricky. I try to limit my travel. Now, in what I do, I do, I get asked to travel. So I really kind of meter that and say, hey, do you really like, there's a big event this week, even next week actually, and they say, hey, are you want to go to this event? And I just said, do I have to go? Is there a reason for me to go? And then and luckily for me, if I have really good bosses in the past and good management people to say, yeah, you don't really need to go to this. This is not, because some people like that stuff, but I try to not go to that. So limiting all that kind of keeps me around too. So
Yeah, it's so important to have managers, executives that are understanding.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think too, when you're around management who have children, they are understanding, and sometimes in the early days in tech, a lot of people are really young, and even in this case, like because I work with a lot of founders, sometimes founders are single, they don't have kids, they don't have those things, and sometimes they forget that, hey, I need to go home and like help my son with homework. I need to like my son has a practice I have to be at 5 o'clock, so I have to leave early, things like that. So it's just I think you have to kind of communicate a lot at work, and that's one thing that I've learned is that you got to just communicate a ton, and also find people in the company that you can ally with that are executives or management people or other parents because they'll kind of then there'll be a little bit of like not just a bunch of young tech people just kind of moving the company, but people know that there's a little bit of like there's other sort of like kind of other mature levels of people that have different kind of things. So
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned a little bit about like it being a balancing act and stuff. So like, what do you do? I know it changes from time to time, but today, like, what do you do to achieve that work-life
I
balance?
mean, communicate a lot with my wife because that's like your spouse, so your partner. You need to do a lot of communication. I think with work, I've learned a lot of little hacks like stay on top of my work. Like, don't wait for work to kind of pile up. Stay really ahead of it as a parent, and then make sure I'm constantly communicating to both my company, my leadership, my teams, because I manage a bunch of teams globally, and then even like making sure I understand the schedule, which it feels like a lot of work, or it feels like a lot of work, but that if you put in that little bit of time, it actually does help. Like, what are we doing this week? What are the like little things like open like what is it back to school night. I don't know when that happens, and so I always my wife, she just puts it on my calendar and says, hey, I told her, just invite me to everything, and it syncs my personal calendar, my work calendar kind of work together, so I see all that, so I don't lose things. And then we still have friends, we still have involvement in the community on certain things, like, and then I have to the biggest thing is making sure that I'm just present. That's probably the biggest thing. So
It sounds like communication, and with all of that, it sounds like you're pretty organized. Like you have to be
yeah,
really
yeah. Well, I have to be, because if I'm not, then I'm gonna if I for especially at work, if I forget something, then it's not good for me to forget something. So I do have a good and I'm one of those. I'm one of those. In my company, the senior level leadership, we don't have assistants. We don't actually. That's something we just they don't believe in having EAs, so we kind of have to manage our own schedules and everything. So it's okay. Like, I don't mind it, because I can. Sometimes it takes more effort to keep someone aligned on my schedule than it is for me just to manage my schedule. So, but and tools help too. Like Slack and all these tools, all these reminder tools, they all just kind of keep me in the right place. Incidentally, me and my wife, we have our own version. We use WhatsApp. We use all these tools to just kind of keep us aligned on the right things. So
Yeah, that's neat that you figured out like a system that
yeah,
works for you
yeah.
and your schedule. So, what would you say is your biggest like struggle or challenge as a working parent?
I think it's always balance, like making sure that I'm not too overly committing to work on certain things. That's the biggest challenge. I think secondly too, because when you're working at a tech company, there's always something to do. I always say there's always 110 things to do, and you can only or there's always like 15 things to do, but you can only do 10 that week, and so that other five things kind of gets rolled over to the next week, and then there's other things, and so I have to make sure that I've had to develop the muscle to say it's okay if that stuff doesn't happen. And it's true. And at startup, only certain things are really important, or in tech as well. And then I'm okay not being in. I'm also okay not, if when you're single or when you don't have kids, you're promoting your career, you're trying to, make sure you're on the right track. I think as your kids get older, that's less important. You just want to make sure you're, providing, doing the right things. At my stage in career, I'm trying to more master my craft, build more of a reputation around what I do versus me trying to build upon that. Like, and also too, I'm real with myself. Like, I'm not trying to become the next, COO or next executive and things like that. I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and and I get pretty well. I mean, you work in tech, you get paid pretty well in general, but I get paid pretty well. I have pretty strong compensation pack, so I just kind of like I'm okay with that. You can always do more, but there's a part of that you have to kind of balance. And I think that's usually the hardest balance, because sometimes you get asked to do more, and you're like, should I do this project? I know how it's going to be, but should I do this project? And then that keeps me kind of in the right place, because it's like my cup can only be it can only be filled with a certain amount of water, so I have to make sure that there's enough balance in that cup, basically. So
Yeah, and it sounds like your priorities shift when you
yeah,
have.
yeah, and they do shift. Like, my son is a year out from going to college, so now he's looking at, like, he's looking at universities and things like that. And so, like, when he's out, it's kind of like, okay, what does that look like for us? Because I think you, or so, I know most people have multiple kids, but for me, we have one child, so we're a little different. But how do we, like, that's going to shift a little bit too, so just things like that for us. So
Yeah, for sure. So, you mentioned a lot about trying to get that balance and prioritizing. So, what do you do for you to relax, unwind?
me and my we try to be like, even like tonight we have to take my son to an event. He has an event tonight, and the first thing we ask is, do we need to be there, right? And he goes, because you never know, right? Sometimes I don't always know when a parent needs to be there, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, then the next, if the question is no, but we have to drop him off and pick him up, we take that time to, like, oh, let's go out to eat dinner, or like, I'm Korean, so I like, and my wife is Latino, so it's like, let's go eat Korean food. So we try to plan around those little things, because we're already kind of so busy. Like, for her, she's really busy during tax season and audits and stuff like that. So it's like, so we try to, like, we have to balance those kind of things, and so we that's how we do it. And then we don't- I we're not my I'm not a big vacation person, but my wife is. So my wife and my son are, but I'm not. But any chance I get, I just try to be at home. But to be honest, I think what's really helped this whole, I know there's a lot of dialogue about work from home, hybrid schedules, and all that stuff. And in I'm in the middle of it as well, because I have a global workforce of about 50 people, and there's all this stuff about work from home, all these things like that. And me personally, I actually enjoy working from home, because one, I can get a lot done, work wise, but also kind of stay, like, now we have a dog too, so it's like someone's got to walk the dog, and things like that. So it's like we have to, like, that actually helps a lot. So incidentally, I'm pretty sure most parents really appreciated the hybrid workforce, or the sort of like less being in the office, more being, more being around the house, kind of like that. And then I know that there's some people, there's some CEOs out there. It's like, everyone's coming back to the office. For us, I'm actually pretty grateful that our CEO and our executive team decided to do hybrid, and based on your lifestyle. They said, if you have family, you can come in twice a week, up to three times a week, but everyone should, if you don't have that, most people should be in the office 3 days a week. You can pick those days. I tend to work from home on Mondays and Fridays, and optionally Wednesday, and I usually go to the office on Tuesday and Thursdays regularly, but in some cases Wednesday, depending on, like, what I need to get accomplished. So that flexibility has really been really good, and I'm pretty sure if I we've had I've had a number I've had conversations with peers and other companies that's really helped parents. Um, I don't know if it helps the company that much. I think there's been a little bit of like people kind of taking advantage of that. That's kind of been giving it a bad rap, but parents I know love it. so,
Yeah, that flexibility is really important.
so that's really helped in the last 2 years. COVID, all that stuff. COVID was hard for parents in general because we're setting up classrooms in our living room and all. It was hard, right? That was hard, but now it's a little bit more easier because the kids got to go back to school and they have to get picked up and they have to go through all this stuff. So
Yeah, and also now with a dog, you have to consider walking that dog and taking care of the dog, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. Have to have a dog.
So who is the dog closest to?
Oh, the dog's definitely closest to me. I think he's sitting behind me right now. He's always around me. Yeah,
Oh, do you walk him the most?
pretty much. Yeah, I'm the walker. Yeah, because when I walk him, I let the leash go so he can run around, and he actually appreciates that.
Yeah, I bet. He has the most fun with you,
Yeah,
probably. Nice. So, with your son being 17, what's like the biggest struggle?
the biggest challenge is obviously when your kids get older, they tend to think they know everything, so that's another problem. But he's picking schools, so just navigating all this stuff, like he's got ambition and he wants to do certain things, and he wants to go, and on the flip side he's also lazy, just like every teenager's lazy and things like that. So I have to constantly just spend time with them, talk to him through things. He's pretty academically solid. I think he gets that from his mom. He just gets stuff. um, he's just I think it's just making sure he's grounded, he knows what's important. um, and hopefully our parenting helps out so that when he goes to college he doesn't do something stupid. I always tell him, a term I always tell him is that I try to give him perspective a lot because that's usually what helps. But I always tell him, like, I always tell him, you know what the word discipline actually means? Like, I'm trying to teach him this, and he's like, what does it mean? And, as a teenager, he's like, what does it mean, Dad? you know, and I told him it basically means when you don't like to do something, you do it. That's discipline. And he goes, there's a lot of times in your life, and I says, I've done this myself. There's a ton of stuff I just don't want to do, but I have to do it. And that's what's going to make you successful. School, business, work. You know, he's like, okay, I get it. I get it. so, oh, he's a great, he's very thoughtful, always wants to ask me questions about things, have conversations about things that are sometimes not easy, but he just wants to know about the world. So he's a little bit of a spoiled kid because he's this only child. So he's got to grow out of that eventually too. So
But it's great that he has that relationship with you where he feels comfortable coming to you to ask questions and talk things through.
yeah, yeah, and that's not. I mean, he doesn't obviously. He has great friends too. So we really his little. I call it his little clique. They're actually really good. They're really good for each other. We know their parents. They know us. They like he actually went on vacation with one of his friends to Oregon, which was different because their family's very outdoorsy, and so he was like canoeing, fishing, doing all this stuff. We don't do that
Yeah.
stuff. And I was like, "Did you like that?" He's like, "Yeah, but I'm not. I don't. It's very rustic, right?" So he's just like, "I don't want to." He's like, "I can do it once or twice, but I'm not. I'm not doing it every year." Like some people go camping every year, and that's great. We're not one of those people that go camping every year. We like to go to like let's go to a resort.
Yeah, like we'll go to Tahoe, but we'll get an Airbnb.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go to Disneyland or Disney World. Like let's go someplace that's a little bit more
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, for sure. So, what's something that you would tell someone in tech who's going to have kids, or something you wish you knew when you?
Oh yeah, I actually had this question from somebody, so it's kind of fresh to me in my mind. I told them that it depends on where you work. I told them, like if you work at a big tech company, I worked at Meta. I know you worked at Twitter, so like now called X. I don't get the X, but the X. But I do know that when you work in big tech, I says they do give you a lot. Like it's a lot. It's really stressful because there's always so much to do, but they do have great benefits, and that's the benefit of that's what you get for working hard, I guess, right? On the flip side, I tell them that you just got if you're going to work in tech in general, you just got to know who's going to be doing more or less. It's very tricky. It's not very common where both parents work in tech. Sometimes that's the case, but it's just kind of interesting. It's not. I don't meet a lot of people where both parents work in tech. I do sometimes meet it, but like most of the time, it's either one of the partners are working in tech, but then one of them is basically like a teacher or maybe I don't know, does something else, right? So I always say you kind of want to have a balance because if you're both doing it, it gets really stressful really fast because you're trying to balance those two things. And I always say you just got to communicate a lot. And there's no like blueprint that works. It's what works for you and your family because some people have family in the area, which does help. Some people have resources, community resources, or could maybe hire in like we tried this. We hired a in-house nanny for a little bit. It just was like I think for us it was just too expensive, and it was just too like we had to pay insurance and all these things. It didn't make sense long term for us. And then, but if you have those resources, it's good. If you're the hardest is when you're, I would probably say if you're both in tech, you don't have no family. Uh, you have other friends that have young kids because they won't be very helpful to you, and then you're trying to accomplish all that at the same time is really challenging. And typically, what I've seen is that someone has to decide who's going to work a little less, not be as ambitious about their career, things like that. And I said you got to probably have that conversation. I know a lot of times I know if you're a partner, like I know people who their partner, the husband is taking a step back in their career and let the female partner become more of the sort of like executive or something like that. Or I have friends like that where they're more prominent and they're okay with that because that's how they've chosen to raise their family basically. Like the wife might be a VP in a company, but the husband has taken a lesser role in the company to work part-time or partial time or be a consultant so that they can be more around the kids and kind of be like you know full-time daddy mommy kind of thing because someone's got to have it. For me, I'm fortunate my wife because she's a CPA, she's licensed, she could kind of do that and she can kind of run her own schedule. And then we do have family in the Bay Area, but it's not. It's hard to leave kids with my parents because they're so Korean that they don't actually do well with the kids. I don't know how to explain it. They're old school Asian, so if you know about old school Asian people, you don't leave them with your parents that
Yeah,
long.
yeah. For maybe a couple hours is fine, but not like the whole day.
Yeah, yeah. They end up like on the roof with my dad doing something. And it's like, Dad, what are you doing? Get the kids down on the
Yeah,
roof.
yeah. And I definitely hear you of like it's just not a one size fits all, right? Everyone does what works for them and their partner and
Yeah, and it's really tough for parents. I know that because I've heard a lot of stress stories and things like that. So I always tell them you got to work it out. You got to kind of like keep iterating on it. You can't just because it works for some of your friends and people it may not work for you. Like things that work for us may not work. I mean, your kids could and then like and also too parents have to deal with like I have coworkers or friends where kids have maybe some form of special needs or some learning disability and all those little things come into play and that's why it's too organic. You can't decide that one size going to fit all. I always say it does get better. That's one thing I always tell people. It does get better when they go to school. That's when it gets better because your schedule's more predictable. But when you first have that first 5 years 4 years is just like, and if you have more kids, that first 5 years goes on for a long time. But it does get better once all kids get all kind of into school. They all go through different phases, and it's kind of like anything. You just have to react and respond to things. But I think long as you and your partner are aligned on what needs to happen, I think it's okay.
yeah, I definitely feel that. We were like, oh, first 5 years, we'll get through it. And then we had another kid and then another kid. And it was like, okay, get through these 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like in waves. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. We added a puppy. It was like adding a kid, and it was like getting up at 3 in the morning to take the puppy out because the puppy needs to go out, and it's like the puppy threw up on the couch, and it's like clean the couch. It's like
Yeah, and they can't express it either, like a baby.
no, no, no. They can't express it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today, Song. It was really, really awesome talking to you and hearing from you.
no, thanks. I hope parents get a lot out of this, and they could being in tech is exciting, but it has its challenges.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure people will find little nuggets of things that are going to be useful for them. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Chow. Have a great time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bytes. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbytes.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, at parenthoodbytes.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbytes.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.